Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.
We're just taking a jaunt around the lakes and the river. You know, my favourite place for these photo walks. Before he's not going to be very happy with me before I drop Sir Barkalot back at home, because he can't come with me today. I'm going to Gloucestershire to go and walk with a photographer. Oh, a photographer live in the real world. Yes. Let me get an establishing picture to set the scene for our walk. You all right, Barney? Barney's found a stick. I did start to make some pictures, which I loosely titled, another one of those projects that starts and will end up in a folder somewhere, Stick of the Day, because it appeared to me he always finds a stick that's particularly precious along our routes at some stage. Is that your stick of the day, Barney? Is that your stick of the day? The other day picked up one that had it had leaves still at the end of it. It looked like a brush. He brushed practically a quarter mile home, or it felt like it anyway. Probably for him it felt like a couple of miles. Don't go under there. That's barbed wire. Get off my land, we'll be very angry with you. Come this way. Oh, shouldn't mention get off my land. It does upset some people. Right. Okay. Establishing picture. Gorgeous sunny morning. So I've got lots of contrast. Here we go. In focus. I'm using the X100V today. There we go. There. Sketchbook image to start the day.
The foreword.
So yes, I'm with Barney, but only for a few moments, because I'm going to jump in the car for my trip to Gloucestershire to meet and walk with somebody who wears many hats in the world of photography, Grant Scott. Sir Barkalot is most certainly not invited for a couple of reasons in particular. I am afraid that if I get the chance, and I will ask, to go into Grant's famous shed, and that's not a euphemism, I am very afraid that Sir Barkalot might choose something that he's not supposed to. And also, Grant has a rabbit, and, don't judge me on this, Barney is rather partial to rabbit ears. Detached, obviously, but all kinds of breeders and vets, and even our vegan friend suggested, yeah, that sounds like we only have one, and even our vegan friend suggested that rabbit ears are particularly good for dogs and excellent treats, especially for training. But if Barney were to take a nibble out of Grant Scott's rabbit's ear, it would be a very bad start to an interview, or indeed friendship. So yes, Grant Scott, it's a very different kind of photo walk show today. Usually, of course, I'm walking with your letters and your thoughts, but today you and I are walking together, and we're going to lean on somebody else for their thoughts, and those will be from Grant. Now, when you Google Grant's name, worldpressphoto.org pops up as the first searched return for him. Well, it did for me anyway. And I hope they won't mind if I read their description of him pretty much word for word. But this is the sort of online bio you'd love to read if it had been written about to you. Here goes. During his 25 years working in professional photography, Grant Scott has been art director for such magazines as Elle and Tatler, and since 2000 has worked as a photographer, editor, writer, lecturer, and creative director. His clients have included Sotheby's and Vogue and Elle and The Guardian magazine and Bang & Olufsen. There's a long list, amongst others. His work has been exhibited internationally. Actually, let me break in here and add to that. Grant's work is held in the permanent collections of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Victoria and Albert Museum, and the Tate in London, and the British Library. That's not bad, is it? Anyway, back to World Press Photo. An early champion of DSLR moving image creation, Grant Scott has spoken and written widely on the subject. He edited Professional Photographer and Photography Monthly magazines in the UK before launching his own title, Hungry Eye, a monthly magazine for professional photographers and filmmakers in 2011. He's since established United Nations of Photography.com, an online platform and publisher promoting informed and engaged lens-based media discussion. That it does. He's judged a number of international photographic awards and has published writings on design and photography, and is also a senior lecturer in photography at Oxford Brookes. And, as you'll find out, if I remember to ask, I will, he's writing an MA. Isn't that amazing? As a bio, yes. Now, I would be very proud of that. And I will add a PS, actually. He is the biggest fan of Bob Dylan. Of that, there is no doubt. And I must remember to ask him about Bob Dylan as well. Now, I know it's not a programme about me, but I would like to compare and contrast what I've just read to you to the rather more modest online search result I received for my time spent in radio at the BBC by TV Cream. Stand by, it won't take long. Neil James, ineffectual weekend early morning radio frontman. Also responsible for Sunday afternoon Put Your Questions to Ray from 2 Unlimited Slot Rockline, but gained immortality through once remarking, on this day in 1941, Bob Dylan was born. And what a shame he's not around to celebrate his birthday today. Yeah. The word that particularly makes me wince is ineffectual. That's a horrible word, isn't it, for a review or a bio? Though, to be fair, actually, what they wrote was short enough to fit on a tombstone. Every cloud, and so on. So I do have some sort of connection with my guest today, that being Mr. Bob Dylan, although I sense Grant knows more about the not-so-late Robert Allen Zimmerman than I. So in many ways, this is a special this week, a break from the norm, and an invite for you to join me as I walk with Grant. We can still take along our cameras and make some pictures, of course. And perhaps I can feature the ones that you take today while you're listening to this next week on the show, if you feel like mailing them in. And, well, here's a little of what you can expect, as I'll edit it later on from our walk in Gloucestershire.
Today on the Photowalk.
And I think photography is amazing if you can find that place, that personal place, as to why you're doing it. What does it mean to you? And if it doesn't mean anything to you, it's okay, but you're really missing out. It's massively important that we share stories and that we respect others and we show empathy for others and that we record history for others and the future. I think those things are really important.
Stories of life told by photographers, and today those stories come from my photo walking guest, Grant Scott. And to add to the clips you heard a moment ago, an unusual story today which I think you'll be really intrigued by, one that underlines how life experience comes back to play a very important role in our photography.
As a kid, I'd have been about 5, 6. We went and we watched the family car destroyed.
Oh, no.
Which I thought was an incredibly emotional, scarring experience.
The pictures, it seems, are all around us and running through our experiences. So whatever you photograph with, be it a mirrorless, a compact, a DSLR, or the latest iPhone, or, while we're talking about Apple, the Apple Quick Take 100. The Apple What Take How Many 100, Neil? Well, the Apple Quick Take 100, dear listener, was one of the first and last digital cameras developed by Apple. Who knew they nearly went into cameras? Stand by to be amazed, although remember it was 1994. 32 photos in this machine at a staggering 0.08 megapixels. And then in 97, somebody at Apple said, "Oh, this digital photography lark, really? Oh, I don't think this one has legs." It's a show where we walk with our cameras each week. And yes, usually I'll delve into the mailbag. It'll be even busier next week in that mailbag, I promise you. But not today. I hope you'll enjoy a walk with another photographer. The three of us. You, me, Grant. And can I just make an appeal? Make sure you do go to today's show page. It is going to be a place you need to visit. There won't be a lot of photos on it, but if you do go with a coffee or 3, and not just a couple of Garibaldis, but the whole darn packet, because Grant mentions many photographers. Many. And I have listed them in order of mentioned appearance on the show page. There's a link to each particular photographer which you can follow within the show notes. What else? Oh, he is known for seeing and telling it like it is. And I know there is another walk to be done sometime, just pulling books off his bookshelf, letters out of his, or off his wall, and asking about the prints upon his walls too. Before we start our walk in his garden and at his shed, the fabled shed, my thanks to mpb.com for supporting our adventures each week. A company that have so generously shown their faith and support in this project of ours. They are the people to use when it comes to buying and selling and trading used camera kit online in the UK, the US and Europe. I use them myself. I'm very happy with them. And, you'll know that the X100 I use, that came from them. And I'm proud that they're part of our story here because they help photographers like me and like you to tell our stories. And sustainability being very important. If you trade through them, you'll also be part of that very important circular economy. Right, let's start to walk. Checklist out, as always. Coffee and Garibaldi's, check. Boots on and laced, check. Walking pants on the inside or outside of your trousers, depending upon where you live, check. Spare batteries, check. Memory cards or spare film, check. Earbuds in, check. Lens caps off, let's walk. And we're going to start in the backyard at Grant's pad, somewhere in Gloucestershire, England, asking him to unlock the famous shed, which if you follow Grant's photography podcast, A Photographic Life, you'll probably have formed a picture of and about. It is the HQ to his global broadcasting endeavours. And if you go to the show page today, you just may get a sort of glimpse. Well, sort of glimpse. So this is the famous... Oh, it does look like a recording studio.
It's got a few bit of baffle on the ceiling and on the wall, but it's just held up by tape. So I'm not quite sure what you'd actually record in here other than the podcast.
There's plenty of voiceover artists that have a shed just like this, that make national campaigns.
I suppose so. It's kind of more my escape place, really. I suppose. And for a while, I decorated the door on the inside, as you can see.
Yeah.
But the fumes from the PVA overcame me, and I couldn't continue. But that's a step back to when I used to be at art school. And that's exactly the kind of work I used to do.
It's rather spooky that the only picture that doesn't seem to have been affected by fading or damp or anything is Hitchcock.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, they're all pictures from 1960s photographic magazines that I had doubles of, really. I suppose it's my the influence of pop art in my early work, but there you go.
You've got cameras in here as well.
Well, yeah.
Did these have particular significance to your career, or are they collector's items? Or
they are no significance to my career whatsoever.
Well, I wanted a story with each one.
Well, the only good story is the little grey one up there. Kenneth Grange, who designed it, gave me that. The little Kodak. But no, they were just, for a while, you know what it's like. I was living in a house and I thought, it'd be quite nice to have a little collection of cameras. So I picked them up, never spending more than £5 on eBay. And it was just a bit of fun. And then I ended up with them and not knowing what to do with them. So they came into the shed. The only thing that's of relevance is the reel-to-reel recorder, because that's the reel-to-reel that appeared
there it is.
in the Bill J film. So that's exactly still with the reel on it that appeared in that film. It's never been played since. I bought it purely for the film.
Would you dare play anything on it now?
Yeah, I'm sure I would if time allowed me. I'm just always so busy.
So most people buy kit before they start a podcast. You bought a shed.
Well, I bought a house, really. The shed was the extra. We were looking for a house that I kept saying I wanted an outdoor room, and then we came here and it happened that the house was owned by a lecturer in creative writing. And that's why she had this shed. But they didn't put the shed on the details of the house. So when we came and we saw the house, I was like, it's got a shed. I was so excited. So yeah, the shed came second. And then I thought, yeah, this is, it's time to make a podcast now that I've got a shed.
How long does it take you to prepare and record and do the editing and everything you need to for your podcast each week?
The length of the podcast. I don't do any preparation. I will have maybe put down a few notes, but never more than one side of A4. Just a few kind of comments just to remind me about what to talk about. Or sometimes I might do a little cut and paste of an article that I want to read to get it correct. No edit. What you hear is what you get. And when so what I do is I record the first half of the podcast, and then I find the photographer clip that I want to drop in for that week. I will not have listened to it previously or done anything to it whatsoever. I drop it in, I hear it for the first time then, and then when it finishes, then my response is the response that I've just heard. Yeah. There's nothing prearranged, and somehow or other, I always come out at 20 minutes, but I have no idea how that works. At all. I don't even really keep much of an eye on the clock. So it is what it is, warts and all, mistakes and all. I don't do any editing or any changing of any kind.
Because I was interested by, when somebody said to me quite a while back, he never listens to the interviews that he has first. I thought, no, that can't be true. Somebody must listen to it just in case they say something a bit left field.
No, I like left field.
Yeah.
And also, a few people who I contact sort of say, well, I don't really want to just answer the question. Can't you do it as an interview? And I always say no, because I don't want to have any input. This isn't for me to make any judgment or edit or change to anything that the person submits. So exactly what they submit is exactly what appears. So they're in total control of their own voice.
Although I feel very honoured to have seen The Shed.
Well, you're only the second person.
Who was the first? Tell me it's somebody very famous that I will feel.
Well, David Eustace, a photographer, he's a very, very old friend.
Yeah.
And he came and he did a portrait of me in the shed.
Yeah.
But you can only see the ceiling of the shed in his portrait. So, no one else is allowed. And you will be no one else after you. That's it. The shed remains a mystery. And a lot of people don't believe it's a shed. So actually, the fact that you've come here and seen it, you can now confirm. Because I always say, well, if I put both arms out, I can touch all four walls. and people think it's some kind of a fakery.
Well, I had this picture in my mind as I was driving here today. I thought, wonder what the shed will look like. I bet it's a bit like my dad's shed, which would have tools at one end, and somehow Grant would have nestled himself amongst all the tools. And I suppose I had a different vision.
Yeah, well, the tools are in the garage. If I didn't have a garage, then they would be in there. No, mine's filled with kind of letters from Don McCullum, guitars and Bob Dylan tickets and stuff. Ephemera, really, that kind of I get kicked out of the house.
Yeah. There's a letter over there. Am I allowed to read it?
Yeah, that's from Don McCullum.
That's a Don letter, is it? Yeah. I feel like I shouldn't read it word for word, but
yeah, by all means. Don used to commission Don to do portraits for me, and that's a letter saying that his telephone wasn't working, but he'll get back to me as soon as he can. Actually, it's a fax that dates that one. But the shed's full of letters. There's a letter roundabouts from John Lipsieff, and there's tons and tons of. In the old days, I used to get lots of postcards from photographers, and I kept them all. I've got a huge amount from Sylvia Placci, who, if you don't know Sylvia, is an amazing photographer and great friend, and was a great friend with André Cortez, and actually trained under André Cortez. So there's a lovely kind of connection there. And of course, Sylvia's son is the actor Adrian Brody. So I have all these cards from Sylvia telling me how her son's going to start taking up drama lessons and all of that kind of stuff. So it's just nice to to keep all this stuff, really, I suppose.
I feel I've been to the outpost of one of the BBC's furthest World Service cabins that they have around the world. This is it. This is it in Cam.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that, because I do a radio thing on BBC Radio Gloucestershire, and it's from the shed.
It is.
So I've done that every month. I do a session with them, and it is. Although now I'm going into the studio post-COVID, but it was from the shed for the last 2 years.
So it was a down the line through Zoom.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, the shed has electricity and it has pretty good internet and all of those kinds of things.
Well, and dogs barking next door. I always hear the noises. I think, right, I can hear the dog barking. There was a helicopter you said on, although I didn't hear it. It was supposed to be a helicopter on the last one.
Oh, do you not hear it? Well, that proves I don't edit it or listen back. That's the other thing, I don't listen back to it.
Right.
So I won't listen back to the podcast after I've done it, and probably until a couple of days later, and then I'll listen to it in the car.
Do you like listening to yourself?
I've just got used to it. My wife never believes me, but I'm intrinsically a very shy person, and so I don't like it. But I made a mistake in a recent episode where I don't know why I said Pete Townsend was the lead singer of The Who, but I did. And then I thought, I could go back and redo that. And then I thought, well, why? Because we all make mistakes in life. Of course, it's Roger Daltrey, but there you go.
Are you much of a photo walker?
No, not at all. I'm from South London, and so for me a walk needs a destination, a reason, and I enjoy walking a lot. When I'm in London, I'll walk from north to south, south to north, but I like to look at urban things. I'm not really interested in anything to do with animals or the countryside or nature or any of those things, I'm afraid, although I seem to live in a rural setting.
Well, I thought this might be purposefully for your photography, that, photographer settles in a very rural part of Gloucestershire with a shed.
No, not at all. It's the serendipity of chance.
Right.
I've lived... Before we lived here, I lived on the beach down outside Hastings, literally on the beach, in a house on the beach.
Lovely.
And our neighbours were Graham Norton and Eddie Izzard. And, we've lived in Cheltenham next to the Ladies' College, and I've lived up a mountain in Mallorca, which is where we came back from. Literally just down the road from us was the now infamous Boris Becker. And who else was there? Oh, Claudia Schiffer was down the lane from us. Yeah. So, we renovated a 4-storey townhouse there.
Would these be your sort of evening soirees with the likes of Schiffer and Boris when he was able to afford a round at the bar?
Not quite. However, it was certainly an interesting group of friends that we had there. But primarily, Spanish-speaking, Spanish friends. It makes it seem like I've got this celebrity lifestyle. It's completely not the case. It just so happens that I seem to find myself in environments where what I call people you may have heard of exist, but I'm not really very interested in that, although I suppose a lot of it will go back to my childhood growing up with Oliver Reed.
What?
As part of my parents' kind of close friends.
You grew up with Oliver Reed?
Well, yeah, my father was a bricklayer, and Ollie was his labourer back in 1957 when he was very first making films, and they remained friends all the way through, along with another very, very small group of friends, right up until the end. Yeah.
Because when you go through your house, it is like I sound like I've cased the joint, but it is like a who's who of photographers. And the few pictures that I've seen, there's a storyboard of the rich, famous, and influential.
Is there?
Yeah.
I suppose so. I don't know. It's the majority of pictures on the walls are gifts.
Yeah.
So it's that weird thing that you end up putting things on the wall that you didn't necessarily choose. But yeah, I think, if you're involved with photography and the media in the way in which I have been fortunate enough to be in the period that I was, which is roughly 1985 was when I first started on Elle magazine, when it very first began. You're going to be in a situation where these people are, and then you end up working with them, and they end up working for you sometimes at the beginning of their careers, such as it with Corinne Day or Jake Chesham or Glenn Lutchford or David Sims, or at the ends of their careers when they've kind of been forgotten about and no one's commissioning them. And that was the case with William Klein and Leonard Freed and Don McCullen, Jane Bown, who was just working for The Observer. She wasn't working for anybody else. And I've always been, I think, it's that South London thing. I have no problem with ringing somebody up and saying, do you want to do this?
Yeah.
And if they say no, it's not a problem.
See, that reminds me of your guest this week. No, that was from the Bill J film. I've got it completely wrong, the Bill J film, where he said if he felt confused or didn't understand a photograph, I think it's right near the front actually, it's one of the first things he says, that he wouldn't be afraid to pick up the phone and ask them. And I think photographers can be quite a generous lot, can't they? Or maybe not.
Yes. I think if you understand the psychology of anybody really on cold calling, it's like, you're selling a product in a way. I'm selling an idea. Do you want to be on my podcast? I've got to sell that to somebody, and I've got to identify how, you asked me to be on this podcast. You had to sell it to me in a way. I've never done this before, and I very rarely talk about myself in this way. So I think you've got to understand the psychology of the photographer and what it is that makes a photographer tick. And you have to take time, and you have to develop a mutual respect. And that's really the case, when I've worked with the big name photographers, I suppose, such as Richard Avedon or David Bailey or who else? Helmut Newton. When you work with these guys, I remember having a fantastic conversation with Paolo Reversi, who I'd never worked with, but we just got on so well because we had so many meeting points in the way in which we saw things, and that helps. That helps. Don't be pushy, don't make it about you, don't take your ego to it. And I think when Bill said that, people had been saying that I was Bill J, and I didn't really know what that meant because I didn't know who he was. And then when I found that footage, which was in an archive in San Diego, it had never been shown or seen. It had just been filmed and then put away. It made sense to me because that was exactly my take on it. But then if you come from a magazine perspective, that's what you do all the time. You're constantly ringing people up and saying, can you do this for me? I always like here these horizons.
What are you shooting with?
It's a Leica Type 109, which is a kind
Not familiar with that.
No, it's a lost camera in the Leica world. It's the camera between the 6 and the 7, little compact. But it's 100 times better than the 6, same as the 7, but it doesn't have touch control on the back screen, which I don't want anyway. And they're really good value.
Is that a zoom?
Yeah. It's got 4K video and everything I need on it.
Right.
But I picked it up for 300 quid. But it's equivalent to a Leica Lux, was it 7 Lux or Lux 7? Which is what, 1,002, 1,003, something like that?
Well, I mean, I was even looking at old M8s the other day, and they're still so expensive.
Well, this is a fantastic camera. I mean, obviously it's the Panasonics, rebranded. But the build quality of the Leica is better than the Panasonic, I think. But I've been looking for years to find a camera that was the equivalent to a smartphone that worked for me, that had the quality that this does. And this is amazing. I'm really not about a red badge. When I announced that I'd got a Leica, everyone was like, "You've sold out. How can you do this? You're not that person." It's the best camera for what I needed.
What kind of person is Grant Scott then with kit? What sort of person were they expecting you to be?
I have no idea. I think most people seem to think they know you because you write or because you do a podcast. You must find that. But I've hardly met them. I mean, people. I was in a cafe recently, and someone came up to me and said, "You're Grant Scott," and I was like, "Well, yes, but I might have to take out a restraining order." And it was really nice, and he listened to the podcast and all of that. But the guy I was chatting with was like, "Does that happen all the time?" And I was like, "Well, it happens a lot more than I'd like, purely because I try to keep in the shadows." So, as far as equipment is concerned, I have no interest as long as it does the job it needs to do.
Do you even know who listens to you? I mean, you say that you're not interested necessarily in the kit and and listening back to your interviewees, and you don't listen to yourself for a couple of days. No, I don't. Maybe it's the way I'm painting it.
No, it's probably true.
But no, do you? I mean, it's. I suppose yes. In some respects, I am suggesting that you don't have an attention to detail. But I've got this feeling that you are very interested in detail, and you are no.
No, I'm not interested in
because
detail.
of the books that you've curated, the people that you've met, the interest that you have, the fact that you lecture, you're writing the MA now. And these aren't the workings of somebody who doesn't give a damn, to use the colloquial.
Well, I give a damn, obviously. I mean, I care passionately about communication, and I care passionately about culture and storytelling. I did a thing the other day. Could you write your biography in 7 words?
Yes. I tried this after I heard you say it.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
How did you do?
Well, I've written them down because I have a terrible memory.
You must tweet them. Otherwise they don't exist.
I will, but I'm going to say it anyway. I like the one, by the way, that somebody tweeted when they said, "Please note schedule is subject to change." I thought that was a good one. Yeah. But I wrote, "What might I have done so differently?" which is a bit melancholic, but I had just spent the last couple of days on the weirdest commercial photography job watching people trim a cemetery. Right. So I think I've been in melancholic mode since then.
I can imagine. I can see that. Well, I wrote, "I'm still an art student at heart."
Yes.
And I think that's my kind of raison d'etre for everything. I grew up in London on the King's Road primarily, Kensington High Street, through the 70s, punk. I was young, but I was part of all of that because of my parents took us to all these things, and so I have that punk ethos that you can do anything. You only need 3 chords to do it with, but do it really passionately and do it show that you care. But I'm not a detail person, as my wife will confirm. I drive her nuts with it. I'm interested in the bigger picture. I'm interested in, and I think that with photography, I think quite often people get really obsessed with the detail, and that's what either stagnates their creativity or gets them frustrated because they can't get the detail right.
Yeah.
But I don't care about the detail. I care about the message. I used to edit a magazine called Professional Photographer.
No, I was a subscriber.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So when I took over the magazine, it was full of wedding photography and event photography and Photoshop and camera reviews. And I got rid of them all. I literally just went, no, this is not the way forward.
Although you did print one of my articles, actually.
Oh, did I? Okay, fantastic. I apologise for forgetting.
And then shortly afterwards, that was it, persona non grata.
Oh, was it? Well, I never remember anything either. No. So I apologise for that. But yeah, so we got rid of everything and we started to talk about photography in a different way.
Yes.
And what was really interesting was that the circulation of the magazine plummeted. However, the advertising revenue for the magazine rocketed because all of the camera people, the brands and so forth, they recognized that this was a way of talking to the professionals that they wanted to sell their kit to intrinsically. And then on the idea that if you sell it to the professionals, everyone else will want it because the professionals have it. And so we started to make a huge amount of money out of ad revenue. But what I was trying to do really was to get people to talk about photography and understand that professional photography is really about the bigger picture. Don't get hung up on it. Don't make heroes of technique. Find your heroes in other places, in unexpected places. And so on the cover of every issue, there would be a hidden quote from bizarre, Steinbeck might have had a quote. I can't remember who had quotes. But if you've got any of those from that period I did the magazine, which I think was about, a year and a bit or something, before I left to launch my own magazine, Hungry Eye.
Hungry Eye, yeah.
There's hidden quotes. Look for the hidden quotes.
I have got some in the attic. We've been doing attic clearance.
Okay.
And I'd keep magazines, much actually to my wife's disenchantment, in boxes of them that you'll never read these again. But one day I might. So I might just need, now this is going to be one of those moments I can say, well, actually, I do need to check something. I'm glad I didn't throw them away.
No, and also I think it might be the last issue I ever did, I can't remember, but I did an entire issue where every headline and subtitle in the magazine it references Bob Dylan. It's an entire Bob Dylan bingo issue. So I like having fun. I'm a big Bob Dylan fan. So I like having fun with things. I don't take anything too seriously.
So you're writing an MA.
Oh, yeah.
And when I heard, this is on the latest podcast, which by the time this goes out will probably be two back or so, but you made a good
Wasn't
point.
That a character from Star Wars?
What was that?
Chewbacca, isn't it? No, sorry, I shouldn't. I apologise.
He's doing the jokes.
No, sorry.
But you made a point about photographers that have been in the industry for quite a while, considering the fact that education is still a worthy prospect. And I think a lot of photographers, particularly me, would think, I can't do an MA. What am I going to gain from it?
Well, I think that's the fault of education, which is what I think I said in the podcast. I think everyone can gain from learning. And learning within a structure, which is intrinsically what an MA is, has to be beneficial. I think it's very easy for us all to get stuck into a comfort zone creatively or within our lives, and by being challenged by the idea of different reading, by seeing things that we don't understand and that ordinarily we wouldn't seek out, has got to be good. So I think there's a lot to be gained, to be honest with you. And I think particularly at the moment, the MA I'm writing is an online MA, specifically to try and encourage people. And interestingly enough, I mentioned it on Twitter before I did anything else. And I got 15 emails the next day from mature photographers saying, I'm really interested in this. One of whom, a really great photographer in America who I've had on the podcast. And I was like, wow, you want to do this? Why do you want to do this? And I kind of outlined the idea, which is a very bespoke MA. It's very much about the people setting their own agendas, photographing what they are interested in, their own passions. And I think that is really interesting. It's to go into education and be educated by people who don't have any intention of putting any agenda on you, or thinking you've got to do this, you've got to do that, but kind of guiding. And that's what I've done with the undergraduate course at Oxford Brookes with great success. And so the idea of progressing that seemed to make sense, really.
Is that what you feel you gained from your PhD?
Oh, PhD. I think what I gained from that, I did a rather strange PhD, which is, there are a number of different types you can do. You can do a PhD, you can do a PhD by practice, or you can do a PhD by publication. And what that basically means is it's a PhD based on what you've already done.
Right.
And because I've written a number of books, made films, podcasts, all these kinds of things, they count as publications. And therefore my PhD was on me. which sounds like an incredibly egotistical and kind
Sounds very un-Grant Scott.
It's really un-me.
Yeah.
It's really un-me. People think that we do what we do because we have an ego. And actually, I've on the podcast, I never mention my name. And on social media, I don't exist. So it really isn't about ego. It really is about trying to share stuff. And so when I came to do the PhD, it sounds like really easy. Oh yeah, just write about yourself. Actually, it's really hard because you have to go deep. It's like kind of personal psychology you're dealing with here. You know, you're trying to work out, okay, well, I did that. Why did I do that? What was the reasoning behind that? What were the memories, personal memories, that form those narratives, and how are personal memories important in our storytelling and in our narratives and in our creativity and our photography, and so what I learned was why I do what I do, which was really interesting, and it kind of confirmed things I thought I knew. So the PhD begins with a photograph, appropriately, but the photograph is one of only two that my mother ever took. And it's of me as a baby, probably no more than a few months old, being held by my father, who introduced me to photography. And behind us on the radiogram is a album by Frankie Lane.
Oh, yes.
No, yeah, Frankie Lane, Rawhide and all of that cowboy stuff. But he'd propped it up on the record player like a picture, like a photograph, because we didn't have photographs on the wall when I was young, you know, in Tooting, in a flat in Tooting, opposite the tube station. And so, for me, that was, it began there. It began with that introduction to seeing the photograph as album cover. That's really interesting. And I think photography is amazing if you can find that place, that personal place, as to why you're doing it. What does it mean to you? And it kind of, if it doesn't mean anything to you, it's okay, but you're really missing out.
So in terms of doing things in a sequential manner, I haven't really started with the story of your life. Already you've said your father introduced you to photography, and there's usually a family member in my experience, in some way involved with a reason why somebody picks up a camera.
Yeah, I mean, he had a Fujica 605, early 1960s, which was the family camera that he documented the family with. And I would go with him to the camera shop that didn't seem to sell any cameras, but we went there. It was at the top of Garrett Lane in Tooting for any South Londoners, and that's where we went to get the film processed. So he would drop the film off, and then the following week he'd pick up his prints. Those guys were really good. And a lot of it was done at the back of the shop. You know, some of it was sent off. But anyway, and then he would make these albums. He would buy these big leather-bound albums from Harrods, and he would construct these books. But he would never let me near the camera, and he had no interest in photography other than that.
Right.
And then in the early 1970s, he upgraded to a Fujica ST701. Look, it's ingrained, isn't it, in our minds, which he'd read in a camera magazine was the one that professionals used. Right. So he bought it, and it was only many years later that I told him that most of those reviews are completely fake and that you shouldn't believe them, to which he was horrified. But anyway, it was a great camera. It was a really, really good camera, and he continued documenting our lives, and I got a little Instamatic camera, a 110 thing with a flash cube on the top.
Yeah, I remember them.
And I did that. But then I wanted to design album covers. That's what I wanted to do from a very, very early age, 7 or 8. And then long story short, but I knew that to do that, you had to go to art school. Someone said to me that St. Martin's School of Art was the best art school in the world. So I thought, I'll go there. Completely naively. So I went to Wimbledon and did my foundation, Wimbledon School of Art. I was at school in Wimbledon. And then I went on to St. Martin's. I got in, not knowing how incredibly competitive and difficult it was to get on. No idea at all. As always, serendipity of chance. Just chucked my hat in the ring and got lucky. And when I was there, I studied graphic design Interestingly, none of us were taught any photography at all, really. We didn't have any lecturers. We didn't have any modules. We weren't graded at any point. We were just told, you're at St. Martin's, get on with it. But in my year was Miles Aldridge and Mark Mattock, who both went on to be successful photographers. Year below me was Jake Chesham and Platon. Lee Swillingham, great art director. Robin Derrick, great art director. Jarvis Cocker was there doing film. In my Sylvia Plath's daughter was there. Nick Rode, the film director's daughter, was there. Of course, Miles is Alan Aldridge's son. So it was a pretty incredible cast, and it was tough. There was no ounce given to not competing. You had to do it. And I heard a magazine was launching. It was called Elle. I went round there with my life drawing. It was all I had, and they said, yeah, okay, days of cut and paste before computers. Sit down in the corner, and you can learn how to design magazines. And that was January the 4th, 1985. So I still had 2 years left of my degree to do. So I would run between Elle, which was in Lower Regent Street, and Covent Garden. St. Martin's was on Longacre. And I ran between the two every day. And at the end of my 2 years, I was given a full-time job at Elle.
It's very similar to, I'm thinking about Albert Watson with how he presented his portfolio out of the blue to somebody just at the right time, at a point or juncture of publishing where somebody said, all right, kid, I'll give you a go.
Yeah, absolutely, because all they needed to do was give me a knife and a pot of glue and stick me in the corner. So that was all that was needed. And, it was interesting because, we were working with Albert. I was laying out Toscani's pictures, Herb Ritz, Bruce Weber, all of those guys. And that's when I first met Bailey. So I'd had this incredible, it was a great team of people there who really were good, really knew their stuff. They'd all come from the Sunday Times and the Observer. So we had Bruce Chatwin writing for us. Philippe Stark was at the parties. It was amazing. And I was 19, 20. 20, 21, something like that. Anyway, a whole load of other stuff happened. I ended up being art director. And then I went on to Tatler magazine. I'd met a guy who used to, in those days before the internet, photographs weren't syndicated easily. So there was this amazing guy called Jim Roerig, and he would come from New York with a briefcase full of 2 1/4 color transparencies of celebrities and say, do you want to buy them? And you could buy them to put them in the magazine. He owned a company called Outline. It was an agency. He repped photographers and I was sort of looking at this work. I was working with another great guy, Jeff Waring, who went on to art direct all sorts of great things. Anyway, Jeff was very much kind of typography, and I was photography. I'd look at this work and I said, yeah, but we can't buy it, Jim. The fashions and the styling, it's too old-fashioned. It doesn't work in an English-European market. And he said, well, why don't you come to America and art direct the shoots, and you could make them European for me. And I started to do that, and then on the back of that, I was offered the job at Tatler, and I was the art director there for 9 years through the 90s. And that's where my knowledge of photography... What I used to do was in Vogue House in Hanover Square, in the basement, they have every single magazine that Condé Nast have ever published leather-bound in order. French Vogue, Italian Vogue, American Vogue, English Vogue, Tatler, GQ, they have them all. And I would sneak down there when it was a bit quiet, art directing, and I'd sit on the floor and I'd go through page by page, looking at everything that Guy Bourdin had done for French Vogue in the 1960s, and looking at this work and teaching myself photography. And that's where it came from. And then obviously going on shoots with photographers, looking at what they did and what have you. And by the time we got to 2000, I'd had enough of that. And there was a few other things that I did, but primarily I started to work as a photographer.
And that plays into this idea you have about life being research, because that was something else that came up within one of your more recent podcasts, where research isn't about necessarily theory. It's about doing, seeing, watching, shadowing. And that's what you were effectively doing with a box of magazines in the corner during your quiet time.
Yeah, that's it. And actually also in the not so quiet times. But I became obsessed with learning and reading and looking at stuff and asking questions, So I'd go on a show. When I first got my Hasselblads, I was like, well, how do you get the film into this thing? I know, I'll ask Terry O'Neill. Because I was always on shoots with Terry. And so Terry said, no. He said, until you can do it with it behind your back,
yes.
He said, you're not a photographer. So I said, all right then, I'll learn how to do it behind my back. So I could load a Hasselblad back without looking at it. So that was a first step. And then I would sort of talk to someone else, or John Swinnell, and I'd say, well, how do you do that light reading thing then? Oh, you do it like that. So every time I was on a shoot, I would ask questions and I would look and see what are they doing, and then finally I was on a shoot in LA with Meg Ryan, the actress, and the photographer was doing it, and I wrote about this, and this upset a huge amount of photographers, which I don't understand why, but it did. It does seem quite easy to upset photographers. Being one, I don't get upset, but anyway.
And you're about to now, probably.
Well, I just said, we were doing the shoot. The photographer it was a Hasselblad on a tripod, and he was photographing Meg, and he wasn't really connecting with her, and the shoot had to go in a certain way. And so I was standing next to him talking to her, and like we're talking now, just having conversation, and she was responding and he was pressing the shutter and getting the pictures. And I suddenly thought, well, hang on a minute here. I'm doing the hard work. I know how to set this up. I know how that camera works. I could do this. And photographers got upset. So, how dare you, as an art director, is getting in the way. I don't want you talking, and I don't want you, impinging on my vision. I say, well, it's a collaboration. When you're working with a good art director knows when to stand in the shadows and step back, and they know when to step forward. And actually, at the end of the day, that photographer's got that job because of me. I chose you. You're getting paid for this, and you're getting paid a lot more money than I'm getting paid. And I'm doing all the work here, So I don't know why that upsets some people. It seems to hit a nerve. I don't understand why.
How was your relationship then when the tables turned as a photographer working then with art directors? Do you like it, or do you prefer to... you know now how to run the whole thing. You've been an art director, you know how to direct. You go into a studio and you probably know what you want, and you don't necessarily need anybody else around you.
Oh, you always need people around you. It's great. That's the whole point. It's the learning thing. I've had great assistants who've gone on, and it's always that classic thing, isn't it? If your assistants go on and they're successful, that's fantastic. And I'm really lucky that mine have. And they've gone on, they've got their own careers, and they're doing really well. That's great. But I love working with stylists or makeup people. I have my team of makeup people and people I like to work with. But at the same time, sometimes I'll work with someone new, and that's great. I never go into the studio knowing what I want. I haven't got a clue. I try not to go into studios anymore. And in fact, from my commissioned work nowadays, because budgets have shrunk so much for editorial, 9 times out of 10, I'm told to go to the person's house.
Well, I was going to say, you have to look very hard to find one of your photographs in an environment that's controlled.
Yeah, well, I'll show you my... In fact, I don't even know if I've got them in the house. I think they're out. But I have books of that work. I shot in the studio, and I can shoot in the studio. It's not something I particularly enjoy. So what I like doing is arriving at a house, and the challenge of finding where is this picture going to take place? How am I going to control it in an environment which isn't set up to be controlled? That's a challenge. It's difficult shooting in people's houses. And they, you always go there and they go, I've turned all the lights on for you. I'm like, okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off all the lights. And we'll work from dark, and we'll work our way up. So you're always trying to find something. I always say I'm trying to find the picture. I'm not making it, and I'm not taking it. I'm trying to find it. And so I'm moving around a lot. If you looked at the pictures, I don't shoot a lot of frames, but I do a lot of movement. So I'm here, I'm to the left, I'm to the right, I'm up, I'm down. I'm constantly trying to find that composition and find that picture.
How long do you spend with your subjects? You have a who's list of subjects on your on your website, many people that I'd love to photograph, Jarvis Cocker included. I know you have more of a personal relationship with Jarvis, but how long do you take with a? It might be a how long's a piece of string question. I appreciate.
Well, the most rewarding comment is when you finish and someone says, "Well, that didn't take long. That was quick," and you're like, "Brilliant! Then I've done my job." So, I would say on average, maybe I don't want to take up their life, but if I'm going to someone's home, which, as I said, most of the time is the case, then I'll probably spend about an hour,
right?
And we'll have coffee in that hour. We'll talk. I'll have a wander around the house or outside, and all the time I'm looking, where should this picture take place? And then probably the actual picture, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, no more than that.
Yeah.
That's unrealistic. More than 10 or 15 minutes is way too long.
And do you think, like you're shooting a roll of film, you say 10 minutes, 36 frames, I should bag this?
Well, if I shoot tons of stuff, all I got to do is blimmin' edit it, and that's going to take more time, and I'm not going to get paid more money for that.
No.
So from my take, I get it right in camera. I'm not doing tons of post on these pictures. That, why would I do that? I'm not being paid for that. This is a business. My job is to get in and get out, and then get those pictures as good as I can when I'm there. I'm looking around. You said I'm not a detail. I said I'm not a detail person. In a photograph, I'm looking at the detail and the whole process of editing. And by editing, I mean the true sense of editing, as in choosing which is the right frame, not post-production. That's an art in itself. Yeah. I'm quite good at that because I've done it for so long.
When you made those decisions for others as well.
Yeah, and so I'm making that decision when I'm taking the picture. It was the photographer Chris Floyd. He photographed my middle daughter and I. Yeah. And Chris said he had them, he was tethered, and he had the pictures up. And he said, "Do you want to have a look at them?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, I'll edit it for you. It makes it easier. And then you just give me the one that I like. And he said, "Well, I'm not watching that." He said, "I can't see you do that." He said, that editing is rejection. And I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I wrote an article about it, editing is rejection, because I'm not saying that's the best picture. I'm saying that doesn't work because of that. That doesn't work because of that. So it's a series of decisions of rejection that leave me with the image that works. It isn't the other way around. So that's why I never have any idea of the photograph I'm going to take.
Interesting.
Because if I did, it wouldn't happen. I'd spend all my time trying to take that picture and not taking the right picture, which is the appropriate picture for the place or the person. But nowadays, I think maybe for a couple of reasons. One, most of my clients know my background, so art directors never come on the shoots because of that, but also because of budgets. It's, small teams.
I wonder if I was an art director, whether if I saw your name on the call sheet as the photographer, I might feel slightly intimidated.
No one knows I was an art director now. God, it's 22 years ago.
Oh, people know?
No, I don't. Only the old people know.
Oh dear.
I think, I don't know. I think the reality is since I gave up, I've curated exhibitions, I've worked at Sotheby's, edited magazines, all of that other stuff. And actually, what's really interesting is how few people actually know that I'm a photographer. Because I never talk about it on the podcast, and I never talk about the commissions. Because I don't think that's interesting, and also there's a sense of it's not appropriate for me to talk about, I photographed such and such last week at their house in da-da-da, and hey, guess what? Their biscuits weren't very good, and the tea wasn't very good, and they were really miserable, and I really don't like that person anymore. It's just no point.
You'd make a terrible blogger.
Yeah, well, I try and talk about bigger picture.
Yes. Just to go smaller picture for a moment. You mentioned John Swanell a moment ago, and learning to load film behind your back, and then you'd be accepted by the likes of Donovan. John Swanell tells a lovely story about how he dropped one of Bailey's cameras, which, as you can imagine, Bailey didn't have a great sense of humour for moments like that. Did you drop any in the process of learning?
Well, no,
definitely not for Bailey, I'm sure.
No, I haven't, although I did see two assistants dive into each other. Bailey asked for a cup of tea, and they ran into each other at such speed and panic. This is before he had his current assistant who's been with him for a long time. And they both ran down his Brownlow Mews, and they ran down the stairs, bashed into each other, and just went catapulting down the stairs, the pair of them. And I had one student who did drop one of my lenses when I was doing a big ad shoot, actually, for Channel 4. That wasn't great. But no. And do you know, I know that story. John's told me that Bailey story. Yeah, I did a shoot once with Jean-Luc Sieff with Elle Macpherson. And so, but he turned up with the Nikon around his neck from Paris and no assistant. And all he asked for was the grey background, one light, a trolley, and Tri-X. And he turned up, and I said, no assistant, Jean-Luc. He said, no. He said, but what would happen if things went wrong? He said, I would have to shout at that person. I said, I cannot do that. I cannot entrust my work to another. Yeah. So he got his Tri-X out, and he unpacked it all, and he lined it up on the trolley, and then he put it into the camera around his neck, and he photographed Elle. And then on the back of that, he hadn't been shooting for ages. No one was commissioning him. And on the back of that, he got the first ever Haagen-Dazs campaign. Wow. So there you go. Yeah. A man with a camera around his neck, loading his own film, gets a huge campaign that launched Haagen-Dazs ice cream. Yeah. Wow. For me, that's where I learn. I learn from seeing this and thinking, oh, okay, it doesn't have to be this other way. It can be this way.
I would never deign to pull you up on anything at all, Grant, but you're not looking through the eyepiece.
No.
You're treating it like an iPhone.
Yeah. I'm the Gary Winogrand of your podcast. Yeah, no, I've never really looked through the through the camera in that way. I mean, that's what I loved about working with the Hasselblad, was that I very rarely looked through the camera, because I was always looking at the person I was photographing or what I was photographing, and then I'd flip up the magnifier just to check. But no, I wanted that eye contact with the person I was photographing.
Interesting.
And so moving on to digital cameras, I sort of constantly try and maintain that sense of not knowing. I think that's the theme for this conversation. Here, I'm interviewing the man who doesn't care and doesn't want to know. But then it might work and it might not work. But if I try and, I don't want to control things. But that goes back to that thing about being an art student at heart. I was taught by amazing people. A guy called Bruce McLean, a great artist, contemporary artist and kind of physical sculptor. And he used to say, and it goes through my head every day, every minute of every day. He taught me to draw. And he said, Glaswegian, a little man used to wear very tight suits. And he always used to say, you got to do the work. And the work meant doing 5-second drawings and on big pieces of paper and then just throwing them away. What? And then and losing that fear of space, and losing that fear of the white page, and losing that fear, and that really stuck with me. So whether it's photography or writing or the podcast, I don't have any fear of failure. I will fail, and I fail all of the time. And in fact, I fail so often that I can't have any fear of it. And when we were talking about earlier, doing Professional Photographer magazine, I wrote a column in the magazine every month. And it was my kind of experiences. In some ways, it was the beginning of this idea of talking about stuff. Different shoots I'd done. And what I found after I wrote about 3 or 4 of them was everything I'd done had gone wrong. Every time I was writing about something, I nearly asphyxiated Kylie Minogue. David Bowie with this and all these kind of things. But it worked out all right. Yeah. It was okay. Yeah. It had gone wrong, but it was okay.
You have commented, I've heard you say this more than once, you said it on one of your more recent ones, that you're more comfortable when things do go wrong.
Well, I don't know if I'm more comfortable. Did I say that?
Yeah, several times. I'm not sure in the 200 and whatever episodes I can tell you the actual numbers, but you must have said this 3 or 4 times. And I am one of those people that's gradually, by the way, going through the back catalogue.
Oh, wow. Well, we're going to have to set up some kind of help centre for those who find themselves in that position. Yeah. I think there's a certain comfort in getting things wrong. I wouldn't like, if I got things right all the time, then I'd feel a pressure to get them right. But I don't feel that pressure. You know, life is too short, really, I think, to put that pressure on yourself. And photography is one of those things where every time you press the shutter, you've got a second or fraction of a second to get it right.
Yeah.
Whoa. You know, there's no, musician isn't like every time I strum a chord or a note, I've got to get it right. Yeah. Same with an artist or a sculptor, you know. And it's why I came up with the idea of photo sketching. You know, this idea of just using, like I've been doing here, if any of these pictures appear on my Instagram that I've taken on this walk, which they might and they might not, they will be tagged #photo sketching. Yeah. Because they're not photographs I'm thinking about. They're sketches. They're moments of texture, of juxtaposition, of light, of shade, of colour, of form. They're not conceived to be photographs that have any relevance or importance.
I want to talk about Bill J and the film. I wonder why you selected Bill J as your protagonist, if you will.
I didn't. He selected me, really. So what happened was, again, going back to that, I was doing Professional Photographer magazine. I chucked everything out. I changed everything. It was perceived in the photographic magazine to be like this kind of mad anarchist had come in and was burning all the bridges. And I got a letter. I so wish I'd kept it, and I didn't, from Joe Partridge, who older people may know. He was a photographer, a teacher, but he had a fantastic TV show through the 1970s. And he did a couple of books, so, you know, search out Joe Partridge. And he would have Bailey on his TV, and it was for beginners. But he'd have good photographers, professional photographers. Anyway, Joe sent me this letter, and it said, "You are Bill J, but they'll never let you continue doing this. You know what happened to him." And I was like, well, first of all, I have no idea who Bill J is. Secondly, I don't know what happened to him. I did. It wasn't pre-Google, but it wasn't when we went Google for everything. And I found out that this guy, Bill J, was something to do with photography, and he died. And I'd left it at that. Then, 17, 16, maybe 18, I can't remember. A good few years later, I wrote an article for the United Nations of Photography that I run. And in it, I said, I posed the question, do we need theorists and teachers and curators in photography? Being sort of slightly provocative. A guy called Robin Galanders, again, a very good photographer, has written books, people may know. He put a Facebook thing to me and said, "You are Bill J. You need to read Occam's Razor." So I was like, well, hang on a second. That's the second person who said I'm this guy I don't know. I'll buy Occam's Razor. So I went on eBay, found out that I could get a copy, bought a copy, started to read it. Couldn't believe it. This man was me. He was a brother from another mother, you know, and I started to read extracts out to my wife. And she was like, "He's you." I was like, "I know. We think the same." I knew nothing about this guy other than just reading these extracts. So I found a very good friend of mine, Tim Pellett, who's a really good filmmaker. But he makes short films. He kind of gets commissioned commercially. And I said to Tim, "Look, there's this guy, Bill J. I know nothing. I want to make a film. You on?" And he went, "Yeah, let's do it." So that was the beginning. His website had been taken over by the Mujahideen. And Tim, who's brilliant online, managed to hack into it and get control of it so that we could access his writing he'd put up there. I started to buy every book on eBay that Bill had written. I started to buy every creative camera I could get on eBay. And every time he mentioned a photographer that I knew was living, I'd phone them up and say, "Do you know Bill J? What are your memories of Bill J?"
Such as David Hearn.
Yeah, David and Patrick Ward and Homer Sykes and Daniel Meadows and Brian Griffin and Martin Parr. Yeah. Oh, names are on the tip of my tongue, but everybody. And then I had to deal with his American side. So suddenly I spoke to Ralph Gibson and Alex Webb and all of these different people. And I started to build this picture of who he was and started to find film footage that had never been seen, audio tapes which had never been listened to. So all this material, and I started to build up this big archive, and gradually Tim and I put this together into a collage documentary of this man's photographic life, which was incredible.
Yeah.
The story, I couldn't believe. Even his ending. When I found out about what happened when he died, I was like, "You're not serious, really? He did that, and he did that." And so then we made the film, just the two of us, no funding, no backing, full-length feature documentary, filmed here and in America. I got friends in America to do the filming for us, everything for free. And then it premiered at the Martin Parr Foundation, and then went on to great success, being screened across the UK and across North America, and it's now on YouTube for free for people to watch, because that Bill would have wanted that. He would want it given away for free.
And Bill's family took part as well, didn't they?
Yeah, I found his daughters, his 3 daughters who live in Tempe, Arizona. I went over and saw them for a screening of the film in the cinema next to the university he taught at, and I found his office, and I walked around his office, and I found all this other material. Then they had all this stuff that they had no idea what it was. They had no idea about their father at all, as to how important he was.
Wow.
And then I finally, I think it was about 2 weeks before the screening, his sister said, "Yes, okay, I'll talk to you." So we bombed to see his sister, who lived near Windsor, and we filmed her. And we dropped that into the film the week of the screening, really. And then all of his family came to the screening. The daughters couldn't come, but his family in the UK. So it was hugely emotional. And now, 2018, that film premiered. I'm still working on it. I'm still finding new material. I'm still researching stuff, which is incredible. And now I've got this podcast series, In Search of Bill J, which is this follow-on. A kind of, I'm still finding stuff out, and I'm still learning about the people who were around him, particularly Tony Ray Jones. I've done quite a lot of research finding out original information about him.
In terms of being an advocate, I mean, I can see why your wife and other people have said, "You are Bill J. You should wear a T-shirt. I am Bill J."
Yeah.
David Hearn within the film said he enthused other people to love photography. And I wonder, and I know you do, and I know through listening to you and reading your words on the United Nations and so on, that you do, and you love talking about photography, and you do enthuse other people. But I wonder if there are less or characters like that in photography now. I'm calling you a character, of course.
Oh gosh, I think there seems to be less people. You know, Bill spoke up, and Bill wasn't afraid of upsetting people. I don't want to upset people, and that isn't my intention. But at the same time, sometimes it does appear that I do, because I speak up. And I think, as then as now, the photographic community can have certain sensitivities, and quite rightly, and you have to be very careful about the landscape and what have you. But I do think, I think I'm the only one from my background who does speak up. And I was talking to somebody else, contacted me recently, and they wanted to talk to me about something, and we had a conversation. At the end of it, he said, "You know, you're the only one who speaks. You're the only one who expresses opinions. Most people don't." And I think that's a shame, actually, because it should be a rigorous debate going on. It should be a good discussion. We should have lots of people getting passionate and speaking out. And I love people saying to me, I mean, I'm always saying, everything I've said to you today, apart from my life facts, is opinion. That's all it is. It's nothing more than that. It's just opinion. And when we spoke last time, I said, it's just opinion. Don't get upset. You know, have your own opinion, but expect your opinion to be challenged. But when it's challenged, make sure that you challenge things that are going on from a position of knowledge, not from a subjective perspective, or too subjective a perspective.
Well, Alex Soth, in an interview I had with him recently, said, "I take myself way too seriously." He smiled as he was saying it. And I wonder, is there an element of that in you, or?
I don't take anything seriously.
No?
No, I really don't.
But photography is very serious to you. You're very earnest about it.
Am I?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Well, I think
I'm
so.
gonna have to
But of
change.
course, everything's subjective, as you said.
Yeah. But that's really interesting. You see, you've challenged me and you've made me think about it. I remember someone saying to me a while ago, I said something, and he came back and he said, well, of course you think that. You're just so stoic. And I thought, oh, what does that mean? I really didn't really know what it meant. So I went and looked it up. And I went, oh, yeah, stoicism. Yeah, that's me. But if he hadn't have challenged me with that, I wouldn't have had that self-awareness of it. And now I'm totally aware of it. What will be, will be. Yeah, maybe I'm earnest about it. I don't know. Maybe it's a persona. I don't know. I think that stories are really important, and I think people are really important, and I think it's massively important that we share stories and that we respect others and we show empathy for others, and that we record history for others and the future. I think those things are really important, and I think it's really important to have. If you'd have said you're really earnest about Bob Dylan, I'd have gone, yeah, I am. But photography, I don't know, what is it? I don't know. Yeah, I've got to give this talk coming up for the RPS for their contemporary photography section. And I just thought, I can't remember what I've called it. It's something like kind of throwing things in the air and dropping them or something. Yeah. And, the first picture is me being shot out of a cannon thing, one of those cannonball people that used to get at the circuses. And then the second picture is of a man being hit in the stomach with a cannonball. Right. And I think that for me is kind of quite often how I feel. Yeah. It's kind of you launch yourself out there and then you get walloped and then you launch yourself out there. There used to be a great musical act of a man who'd hit himself on the head with concrete. Right. That was the act until he couldn't do it any longer because he wasn't well. And I think sometimes, it's a bit like that.
Tell me about let's talk about the United Nations of photography. It's a very important part of your life. The podcast has grown out of it as well. Yeah.
So basically when I left, when I was at Professional Photographer magazine, I did this thing called the United States of Photography.
Yes.
And I set up this thing with this idea that photographers in different areas of practice should get on better with each other. So I thought it'd be fun to do the United States of Photography, and I did badges, and I tried to set up a forum, and I was just hit by all these people saying, why are you choosing America? The United States. I was like, oh, seriously? The idea was you all got on. Not that you attack the name of the blimmin' thing. Anyway, at that time, I bought a whole load of URLs, including the United Nations of Photography. .com. And when I left Hungry Eye, which I did 12 issues of, and that was kind of me and my laptop designing it, editing it, I realized that I didn't have a platform any longer to do something with. I was actually driving over Salisbury Plain with my wife, and I was moaning and saying, I don't have a platform. I want to do something, but I don't know what it is. But if I did something, I'd need a platform. And then I suddenly thought, I've got the United Nations of Photography.com URL. I'll do that, which is very kind of a Bill J kind of take on things. His decision to leave this country and go to America was based on throwing the I Ching, and I have a very similar kind of let's do it, let's start a band. And that was really where it began. And I started off by putting material that had appeared in Hungry Eye on there as a kind of a starting point. And it's grown from there, really. And initially the idea was to try and get lots of different people to write for it. But nobody seemed to really want to do that. Everybody sort of kind of had their own thing, and I appreciated that. And so I ended up writing everything. And then the podcast, everything that's come from that, we did a book very early on, the Dench Diaries, which was my idea for Professional Photographer magazine, was to have a photographer writing what was really happening, and as a photographer, bring the reality. And I'd seen Peter writing some tweets, so I got him to write his...
He's a very good writer, Peter Dench. I remember reading his pieces.
Yeah, it was... And it was great at the time because he was having a tough time. And so most of it was him sitting on the bed waiting for the pub to open. And I really liked that. I thought, yes, this is good. I don't want to hear... This is why I never talk about my photo shoots. I don't want to hear about other people's success. I want to hear about waiting for the pub to open. Anyway, so we published a book of that, which went very well. Yeah. And so, that's really what it is. And then the podcast came about because my wife had kept saying to me about writing a book I think probably just to get me to stop talking about my life. And sort of write a book, for goodness sake. Then I thought, well, no, I won't write a book. I'll do a podcast and I'll call it A Photographic Life. Yeah. And then after about the first 3 episodes... I thought, oh, really? I can't keep doing this. I'm not that interested in my life. Surely no one else will be. And then it started to evolve. So it started off with me talking into the wrong side of the microphone. Because after the first episode, my friend Tim, got the filmmaker, he said, well, what way is the microphone pointing? All I can hear is birds. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, wrong side. So, it started off from that position of, as with everything I do, of complete failure. And then it went through lots of kind of funny things, really. Sometimes, I would get the Bauhaus to sponsor an episode, but of course they weren't really sponsoring the episode. And I think the Stoics sponsored an episode, And so I would kind of dedicate episodes to our sponsor, but our sponsor might be the Abstract Expressionists. So it was just playing around with the form, really. And now it's a bit more regular, but we still chuck in the odd madness, I'm as likely to start it with the soundtrack to a funny thing that happened on the way to the forum as anything else, really, what it's like with podcasts. We all try and do our own thing, don't we? I just don't want to be one of those kick podcasts where we're all guys and we're all drinking coffee. And
I wonder who you're talking about.
Well, I don't know, because I have to be honest. I only listened to a couple of those. When did I start the podcast? I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah. So I have no knowledge. I don't follow any of those podcasts. I listen to lots of podcasts. Apart from your one, I don't listen to any photo podcast.
I was surprised you listened to mine, because I remember our conversation where you said 20 minutes is more than enough, and I thought, oh my goodness, shall I tell him it's an hour and a half? Yeah,
I never get all the way through.
No, I didn't think you would.
I have to admit, but that doesn't matter, because I don't think it's it's not like this kind of thing. It's not like an exam.
No.
That you have to do it.
No.
And I tend to listen to them in the car.
What's your take on while we're talking about podcasts? Social media and Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and so on and so forth?
Twitter for me is hugely important. Oh, we're going to get run over again, look. Yeah. Country roads.
We should be wearing our high vis.
Yeah, John Denver didn't know about these kinds of country roads. So, Twitter is hugely important for me. I think it's a really fantastic library in your pocket. I very rarely have any problems with Twitter. I follow people that I want to follow. I don't have any issue. I have really good interactions, and I've made lots of good friends. Yeah. Facebook is only for my family. Instagram I've never really got the hang of, and I find it incredibly frustrating with this new Reels thing. YouTube's useful, that we've got the Bill J film up on there, but I don't use it for anything else.
What about your students when you're lecturing? Because of course they're of an age and time where social media is very much their currency.
Yeah, but you know what? It's amazing. They're not on Twitter, and they find it really difficult to use Twitter. Mm-hmm. It's a confidence thing, I think. That idea of being judged for writing the wrong thing again, but that's a whole other discussion. Some are on Instagram, but they don't really get it. Mm-hmm. So, this myth, I think it's a myth. The young people get social media and the old people don't. For me, it's just another form of publishing. So, 58, I'm far more active on social media than my students are. Oh. I'm not on TikTok. I tried it once, and It's a bit like watching Love Island. You look at it and then you think, well, this isn't my world. So I think it's hugely important, but I think like everything, and it's like with photography, it all boils down to your expectation.
Yeah.
What's your expectation? If your expectation is unrealistic, you're going to be disappointed. But just don't get angry. People get so angry. Oh, it's not what it's, oh, it's all this, oh, this has been ruined.
A couple of months ago, and I think this plays into that contextually, you ran a piece, or you wrote a piece called "It's Not Easy Being a Photographer" in 2022.
Yeah.
And you talked about security and anxiety, and you touched on mental health.
Yeah.
I wonder whether COVID has brought those issues more to the fore, or whether we always had these anxieties as creatives anyway.
Oh, goodness me, it's such a big subject, isn't it? I mean, I know you've done some mindfulness and mental health discussions so far. You know, it's huge. I think you could break it down into different areas, to be honest with you. I think it affects different people at different ages in different ways.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the time from an education perspective, I'm dealing with 17, 18-year-olds. The issues that they face are very different from the issues that a 40, 50-year-old working photographer whose work has dried up is facing. You know, they're different. Has COVID kind of emphasised these issues? Absolutely, of course, I think it has. But I think what it's also done is introduce new problems, which is why I wrote the article, was to sort of say, well, yeah, okay, it's made it difficult for you, but it's also made it difficult for other people, and they're trying to deal with it as well. We all need to be empathetic of that. And I've done a huge amount of research into anxiety-based depression, particularly amongst teenagers, to try and understand and try and be able to support and encourage people as much as possible. But I think in a way, from a photographic perspective, the key to it is don't put that pressure on yourself. And I think a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves. You know, I always say with anxiety, you know, go and buy me some. You can't. It doesn't exist. But of course, it exists. But anxiety is a self-made product. You know, people make their own anxiety. You can't go and buy anxiety. So what about if you stop making it? Which is a very easy and glib thing to say and a very difficult thing in reality. But perhaps it can bring, you know, photography can remove some of that.
And does it? I mean, this is often something we've discussed, the mental health benefits of embracing a creative. I know you don't call photography art, but I was almost clumsily wandering into that. But you know what I mean. This correlation between a good mental health and something like photography as a partnership.
But you know, if you set out thinking and putting pressure on yourself to make the perfect picture, you're never going to enjoy it.
No.
And that's why I say don't take it too seriously, and don't look through the camera, and don't worry about what other people think, and don't worry about likes on social media, and don't share your pictures unless you're expecting people to have an opinion. You know, opinions are like eyes and ears. Everyone's got them, but everybody uses them in different ways. It can be great to have feedback if that feedback is from an informed place, which is a respectful place, but it can also destroy people's confidence. The first question I always ask when people, I mean, I mentor photographers and all sorts of things, always for free. And I always say the first question is always, what's your expectation? And I won't say anything until someone says to me, my expectation is this.
Yeah.
Because then I can set a context for that feedback. If I don't have the context, I might judge your work on the basis of a professional photographer wanting to work for Vogue. But you might not want that.
Yeah.
You know, you might want just, are these nice pictures? You know? So expectation is the key to, I think, to all of it. And it's why a lot of people get kind of down and they get sad with their photography, is that their expectations are either too high, inappropriate, or not set. And that's the one question that most people seem to find quite difficult to answer.
Well, we've ended in your garden.
Yeah.
I think you need to photo walk more. You'd enjoy it.
Maybe.
I
Maybe.
don't think I've converted you on that. Projects. I personally think they're really important that photographers find time to do a project. And on your website, on your photography one, that is, there's and one of my favourites is the what was it called? Night at the Bangers Crash Happy, which you also exhibited actually. And I have some happy memories of a Night at the Bangers actually taking part in a race.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Did you do it?
Yeah, I did.
What was your experience? 'Cause I ended up in a car that ended up in my eye.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
it was
yeah.
not nice.
No, it's a risky business.
Yeah.
But you know, it's really interesting, Crash Happy, because the reason I did Crash Happy, and maybe this is the key to personal projects as well, I did that back in 2000. So it's about 20 years old. It was a Café Royal book as well. They published it as a book. And that came from a personal place, because when I was a kid, back in 67, 68, we had a Ford Zodiac, white wall tiles, two-tone, red leather interior.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Lovely.
And my parents went to see the musical Hair. They came out and the car had been stolen. A few months later, it came back. It had been hand-painted. It had a Jaguar emblem bolted to the bonnet. It had been trashed. So my dad, who as a builder, he knew someone who was banger racing. And so he took it to Wimbledon Banger Racing, the speedway track down there. Yeah. And as a kid, I'd have been about 5, 6. We went and we watched the family car destroyed.
Oh, no.
Which I thought was an incredibly emotional, scarring experience.
Yeah.
And then back in 2020, I remembered that experience and I thought, I'm going to go back and I'm going to document banger racing because it meant something to me. And I spent a year going every Sunday night, shooting on film, meeting the guys, being friendly with the guys. They were the kind of guys I grew up with, builders, scaffolders, whatever. And then I raced a car. They gave me a car and I raced it, which was quite horrifying, but at the same time for me important to try and understand the whole process. So it wasn't just about the photography. Great writer Pete Silverton, who I knew from The Observer, he wrote a little piece of text which appeared in the Café Royal book. So yeah, personal projects must be personal. I think you need to dig deep into who you are as a person, what's important to you, and why are you doing it. Our stories are interesting. Our personal stories are interesting, even if it's just for us. But from that experience in 1968 came quite a big exhibition of work. I got a lot of commissioned work on the back of it. Wow. And then a Café Royal book, which a picture from that was exhibited at the Martin Parr Foundation recently, 2022?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2022. So it was part of the Café Royal anniversary exhibition, and my dad came and saw the photograph, which we spoke about previously, with that idea of sadness in the exhibition. So the whole project came full circle. Yeah. Which was rather wonderful. And he didn't even know I'd done the pictures. So I'd never really told him. So I keep everything quite quiet. And so personal projects, make them personal. Dig deep. What's interesting to you? What makes you tick? If they mean something to you, you will do them. You'll complete them. You'll give them your time, your energy, your investment if required. That was quite expensive because it was all shot on film. I think that's where I would go with personal projects.
But you don't have to go too far either, do you? I mean, construct your project, which was essentially what you found on the floor, what you found in walls, what you found, for me, that was, something that says there's always something to photograph.
Yeah, well, that was, I bought a Ricoh GR, can't remember which one, the digital one of the very early GR digital ones, really great camera. In black and white, it had a very wide lens, and in black and white, it was really gritty. And I thought, okay, that's gritty, concrete's gritty. I'll start photographing where I am and what's beneath my feet. Yeah. And and that became that project. And when I sort of thought, okay, that finishes now because, and in fact, it's now my 10-year-old daughter's camera. And so she uses that all the time for doing similar kinds of non-looking through the camera observational pictures, learning to see. So yeah, that came from that. I haven't done any photographic. Oh, I did actually. I'm working on one at the moment. Art school tables, which is, I don't think I think there might be some on my Instagram, but I haven't put it together. I must put it together properly. Because I work at an art school, I noticed as I was walking around in the early morning that there are all these tables that the students had painted on, glued on, and the textures, kind of like abstract expressionist paintings, were developing on these tables. And I thought, well, that's very interesting. Again, that serendipity of chance. So that became a body of work of art school tables. So yeah, you don't have to travel, and you kind of shouldn't travel, really, if you want to make things which are personal to you. I think that's the key thing.
Serendipity is a word that's come up in our conversation a few times today, and it
Serendipitously.
Serendipitously, yeah. And it appears to me, or feels to me, that actually that's driven a lot of your career and your creative thoughts. Oh, Crash Happy ended up being a book and an exhibition.
Yeah, and my life. Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone knows what it's like. You know, you get to points, don't you, where you've got a choice. You either take the safe route or you take the difficult route. And for some reason, I always seem to take the difficult route.
It's more fun.
Well, I think, I always used to say when I ran teams on magazines and stuff, let's head to the choppy waters because that's where the fun is. I don't want to be becalmed. And I think photography lends itself very well to that documentation of the choppy waters. I always joke, when I give talks about photography, I always say that it's no big deal. It's capturing light in a box. It just so happens there's lots of different shaped boxes, and it's up to you which shape box you choose to use. But if it's just capturing light in a box, how are we going to get anything from that? Well, to get anything from that, I think we have to explore who we are. And that does take us into areas of photography that some people find difficult to deal with or to look at or to understand. And a bit like contemporary art, it can become alienating. But it means something to someone when it was created. And so we can try and travel that road rather than perhaps creating something which is purely aesthetically pleasing for the sake of being aesthetically pleasing, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with. But photography does give us an opportunity to go deeper if we wish. And I think serendipity means that you're constantly increasing the size of your comfort zone. You're not, we talk about coming out of your comfort zone. I always talk about increasing the size of your comfort zone. So you kind of remain in a comfort zone-ish, but you're always kind of at the edge. Do you know what I mean? You're always pushing that boundary, that border. And maybe I've pushed it so far that it takes you into a place of... when I left professional photography, they bought me a T-shirt, and the T-shirt said, I think it was "I exist in chaos," or something like that. I've misquoted Dylan, but I think that's kind of maybe I don't know. We're still trying to work this out. I don't really know any of the answers to any of your questions at all, and your questions have challenged my understanding of me trying to answer your questions.
I could probably ask, because she's not so far away. I believe she's in the house. She's come back from her run. But
my wife?
What would
she's gone.
Oh, she's
gone again.
Maybe we've saved to this question then. But you could answer it. What would your wife say about you as a person?
She doesn't believe I'm shy, but I am. And I don't know, we should have asked her, really. I think I only say about the shyness because we discussed it last night. She thinks that I'm very open-minded and ambitious, and always very strategic. Very strategic, yeah.
And a life question: if you could rewind everything. Sort of rewinding's been on my mind probably because of that commercial job at the start of the week, watching people stream in a crematorium.
Yeah.
But
I've got a funeral to go to next week and give a reading at. So I think that's always in our minds, isn't it? Well, it's always in my mind.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm aware of that.
Would you choose photography and all this all over again?
Oh, I never look back. There's a Dylan thing. Don't look back.
Yeah.
I can't answer that question because it's not even in my vocabulary to look back. I never look back.
You are a huge Dylan fan, aren't you? And you have met him.
Yeah, I bumped into him.
You bumped into him.
Yeah.
It wasn't a long meeting, was it?
Well, it could have. It could have been. We were on the King's Road back in about 85, 86, and I walked into Antiquarius, which was a big indoor antique market at the time, middle of the day, midweek, and it's very narrow. And he was standing in front of me, no more than a couple of feet. But it was only the width of one person, Antiquarius. The other person always had to kind of go on the side let the other person pass. And I was just dumbstruck, and I just stared at him, and he stared at me, and he went, huh? And I went, huh? And I just kind of went side on, and he walked past. He was with a couple of women, and he went outside, and my wife at the time, my first wife, said to me, you can't let this pass. You've got to go and speak to him. You've got to. Yeah. So I ran outside onto the King's Road, and he was standing there in front of Antiquarius. If anybody else is into Bob Dylan, think about the cover of Street Legal, and he was standing exactly like that. And I ran round to him, right in his face, and I just went, and I couldn't say anything, and I ran away.
Oh, no.
But
all the famous people you've met in your life and all the people you've photographed and...
Couldn't do it. And actually, I spoke to somebody else recently who's a Dylan fan who bumped into him, and he just shook his hand. And I thought, wow, that was good. I should have thought of that. But I was surprised that Bob even did that. Yeah. I love the fact of his... we've spent a lot of time talking about serendipity and changing and not knowing what's going on and whatever. And I take a lot of that from Bob Dylan. He goes on stage and he doesn't know what he's going to do, and the band think he's going to play one song and then he sings another. He's not quite like that now, but, that idea of constantly re-evaluating, evolving, trying things differently, an awareness of the past, informing the present and the future. I buy into that. Yeah.
In your podcast, you ask people, what does photography mean to you? We've come full circle, really, because that's pretty much how we started in your shed quite a while ago.
Yeah.
If the table were turned and the same question was asked of you, what would you say? History.
That's it. History. And I'm a bit pre-warned because my 10-year-old had asked me this question before. And I didn't think about it, and I just said history. And she went, oh, that's really annoying, Dad. That was good. I don't think she was trying to catch me out. But yeah, history. Yeah.
And my sincere thanks to Grant Scott. And I hope you've enjoyed taking a photo walk with us both today. And as I said right at the start of the show, next week perhaps I can share some of the pictures that you've made during this time together. As you've walked and listened and made your pictures, send to studio@photographydaily.show. That's studio@photographydaily.show. 2,000 pixels wide, please. Or if you're shooting with a smartphone, just best quality will be fine. There are, as I said at the start, many links to names of photographers mentioned on the show page for episode 310 today. So go to today's show page on photographydaily.show, the website, or follow the link in the podcast player app that will also take you there. I'll tell you what's on the More Show on Patreon tomorrow in a moment. We always, of course, have a play-out song, and this week is no different. Something rather special to end with. Within the film Do Not Bend, about Bill J, mentioned many times today, there's a beautiful song called Postcards from Nowhere, a song for Bill, which fits the particular point in the film where it's played perfectly. And I'm delighted to say I can play that for you today. It's by Grant Campbell, and that's the play-out song in a moment. But of course, we also have our postscript, which has to be from Bill J. I know we ended with a quote from him that I chose last week, but this week I asked Grant to suggest his, and it was something Bill J said 2 years prior to his passing. I was very fortunate in discovering a way of objectifying self very early on, and photography became my passion. everything about photography, everything I write about photography, everything I photograph has a feedback system which says what it's like to be human. Bill J. from 2007.
Happy as a free man driving on without a care in this world. The rumor is they love you, but money can't buy back your soul. Shorten the mile. No fruit up in the orchard and turn my hand. I ain't going down that beat on path. A frame will mark the borders, but look outside. See the light, I'll see the light. Take me from the boardwalk, I feel like going home. Write it on a postcard from nowhere I belong. There's nowhere I belong. Discovery or invention, the tailored smile, the hidden love of the beholder's eye. Revelations mark these wiry veins. Wisdom lies beyond all the haze. Take me from the boardwalk, I feel like going home. Write it on a postcard from nowhere I belong. Is there nowhere I belong? Take me from the boardwalk, I feel like going home. Write it on a postcard from nowhere I belong. Is there nowhere I belong? Put another log on the wood pile high. Left to learn, not learn to be admired. A little south of Utah you can't escape. Winter frost or the warm embrace. Take me from the boardwalk, I feel like going home. Write it on a postcard from nowhere I belong.
film Do Not Bend, which is embedded on the show page today, and the song is called Postcards from Nowhere, a song for Bill. And that's it for this week. My thanks to Grant Scott once more, mpb.com, and those who are patrons, which you can join through the link on the website photographydaily.show. And for those wonderful supporters who are, tomorrow is the More Show. Now, I went on a workshop last weekend. We talked about it to gain some confidence in street portrait work once more. It was quite the experience, and there is one particular portrait I made which I want to talk about tomorrow. A portrait which, of course, was a picture, a set of pictures actually in the end, but also some sound. And that is the More episode over on the Patreon channel tomorrow. Monday's challenge in the assignment show is being set by a guest who is here in 2 weeks' time, the presenter behind the photographic eye, Alex Kilby. And next Friday, the Photowalk is back with your letters and thoughts and feelings and a wonderful project to talk about. Alex Fredriksson shares pictures and thoughts and writings from her Austrian project, Feet Under the Seat. A fabulous project made riding the train. Stories of people whose only pictorial narrative are their feet on the floor of a carriage. Music today is from the wonderful artlist.io. My thanks to Neil Ford, Emily Renier and Andrea Gilpin as ever for your help behind the scenes, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time.
Barney, by the power of podcasting, it's become evening. Have you missed me, Barney? Sabar Kalot? Don't all shout at once. Yeah. What a thoroughly enjoyable day with Grant. We didn't really make a lot of pictures. In fact, we made hardly any at all. Call that a photo walk, Neil? Well, it was, really. We made a few pictures, and it's, what do we say, quality over quantity. I bet Barney's going to jump in his favourite stream down here. And yeah. Go on then, in you go, come on then. In you go. Fantastic. Some dogs, they manage to look, when they come out of the water, it's almost like they drip dry, and it's like they've never been in. He, half of his body, looks like, what are you doing? Barney, come on. Looks like he's shrunk. Leave that. What have you found?
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.